This episode is brought to you by our good friends at Wilderness Labs. Meadow by Wilderness Labs is the only IoT developer platform that supports full .NET on microcontrollers out there. Their mission is to make building IoT hardware as easy as creating web or mobile apps. Get 10% off when you use the code IoT For All at their online store at store.wildernesslabs.co. Welcome, Wienke, to the IoT For All podcast. Thanks for being back on the show.
Thanks for having me again.
It's great to have you. Really interesting topics to discuss today. But before we do that, I'd love it for the audience who might not be as familiar with you and your organization. Give a little overview, just give a background, kind of understanding of what you all do, and then your background as well.
For sure. So my name is Wienke Giezeman. I'm CEO, co-founder of the Things Industries, and we're a global leading player in the LoRaWAN space, where we help customers build LoRaWAN solutions. The LoRaWAN is a wireless network protocol that sits on the RF protocol LoRa, and basically where it's kind of like stands out is that it allows you to build sensor applications in enterprises that can run on low power sensors. And low power sensors in enterprise IoT solutions are very beneficial because that will drive down the operational costs of kind of maintaining these IoT solutions, because you don't have to change the battery that often. So that really is, in a nutshell, kind of the technology that we support and the value that we bring.
A couple different topics I wanted to hit on. I think maybe we start a little higher level first. From your perspective in the space that you work in, give us a little overview of kind of where things stand with the IoT industry as a whole and the LPWAN market, kind of just together. Where are we right now, just from your perspective?
Yeah, so from an expectations perspective, I think if we go back in time to 2015, there was a lot of high expectations around this concept of LPWAN. So again, low power wide area networks. So wide area networks where small sensors could send tiny bits of data while consuming very little battery power. And the expectations were high. We had things like Sigfox, LoRaWAN came up, and Urban IoT, LTM, and yet all these kind of different flavors, and of course the kind of the marketing and the corporate engines around these technologies, they were kind of like running at full throttle and kind of like painting a lot of kind of opportunism, and if you see kind of like what happened over the last few years is then you peak in the hype. And then in the end, kind of like the true adoption will need to drive you to what they call this plateau of productivity. And what happens actually through that transition is that these technologies will find their niches. And where they were positioned as competing technologies in that, let's say 2015 to maybe 2018, 19, you see that they're actually complementary technologies. So if you zoom into LoRa, as LoRa was positioned as this LoRaWAN wide area network, but we now have our software now supports around 2 million LoRaWAN devices all across the world, from mining air quality measurements in mining Chile to tracking cattle and doing cattle tracking in New Zealand. So what you saw is that actually this technology, LoRaWAN, really became valuable in private network. So it's not so more kind of like, if you look at all these different devices and all these different customers that we support, they all built their own private network and they set up their own base stations for their own farm, for their own shopping center, for their own neighborhood. And there's a wide range of use cases on top of it. Another thing there where LoRa found his niche is that actually the so-called NRE, kind of the cost to kind of like engineer and do the research and development to make a product, they're pretty low for an IoT device. So this also resulted in a very large device maker ecosystem. So our platform has around 300 device maker partners, and they together push around 1,500 different LoRaWAN compliant products. So yeah, that's a bit kind of like where we're at. That LoRaWAN really starts to stand out in enterprise IoT solutions.
How has the collaboration with and integration with other connectivity technologies helped enable LoRaWAN use cases. So I know I've had conversations with people about satellite coming in as well. But where do you kind of see that going? Why is that so important?
Yeah, so I do not really support the hypothesis of what they call LPWAN convergence. So so what I firstly see is that kind of the base LoRaWAN technology where you set up a gateway and put up on devices. This is really where kind of it currently drives productivity. If you then look forward, they're kind of like using LoRaWAN where you put a gateway in a satellite, and all of a sudden kind of have this larger coverage. That's kind of like the potential that it could have, right? So there's a lot of companies that do satellite IoT, and they're all kind of like figuring out the technology, figuring out which market to address. So that's a super exciting thing that's coming for us. But that's not something you can bet on for your solution for something that will work within now in 6 months. So kind of also to grab the part of your questions, where are other technologies coming together? We more see what happens is that, for instance, for building your own LoRaWAN network, you need to set up a gateway. And actually the perfect backhaul for a gateway in almost any scenario is a cellular backup. And now with really kind of favorable MVNO pricing, this is where you see these technologies come together. So it's more that they come together because they're kind of like this tool in the toolbox, or this component where you can build your stack from, but they're not really coming together where kind of like where they're fusing together or something, right? Or that we see multi-radio a potential. That is not something I see. I see them being stacked together like Lego parts, but definitely not coming together on the RF level.
So if I was to ask you, kind of as we look at this, the market as a whole right now, things that are being done correctly, like the right decisions, the right direction, and the things that are maybe being done wrong, how would you kind of answer both of those separately?
This is a really good question. So I it's really hard to say kind of what's wrong and what didn't go well. I think there's been a lot of experiments, and I think what we can conclude for at least LoRa is that it's the initial hypothesis that it was going to be successful as a technology that would be adopted by operators. Now it's successful for technology that is by enterprise. So I always like to think in kind of like as a scale-up entrepreneur, kind of like thinking hypothesis. So that hypothesis, we proved it wrong, but it's very interesting that this technology found kind of in another niche, found their place. I think what also kind of has been kind of what also has been experimented is that the kind of like IoT companies that do too many different things, right? So, and that dilutes your effort. So, and what we've seen is that actually fulfilling the technical promise that we all put out there during that hype of the 2015, 16, 17, actually doing one part of that really well is already really hard. So what I now see is that companies that really take a spike and doing one field with a very clear vision, doing one thing well, and I think that's kind of really what I see now successful. And for us, that meant that we had to be the best toolbox for LoRaWAN. And then what you now see moving forward is that you see that companies that went all in for a vertical, right, and really know their domain, they're successful, and companies that went all in on one horizontal, not trying to do everything horizontal, but one horizontal, right, one technology, they're successful. What I also see moving forward is that the hypothesis of having a toolbox of multiple of these tools, that's a very interesting way forward, because in the end, it's the systems integrator and the hardware designer and the solution designer that just wants to pick the right bits, and they want to limit their overhead, and they want to limit a cluttered stack, right? They want to work on, and they want to cherry pick. So I think if I look at companies that really focused, which is this big cliche in business, of course, but also here, you see they're successful.
Well, I think it's interesting to have watched the IoT industry grow over. I mean, I've been in it now since 2016. So around just over 8 years now. And watching the evolution of what the big thing was that companies were promoting to drive the industry forward. If you remove the different components and the different technologies and focus on what were the really big approaches companies were taking. Earlier on, it was very much based around having a platform, right? There were tons and tons of platforms out there that were being marketed as our platform can build any solution you want or any IoT solution you want, regardless of vertical, regardless of problem. We have a platform, use our platform. And then I think people started to understand that that was going to be a difficult sell because people still didn't really understand a lot about all the different pieces and what a platform actually meant, what it could do. And then they became a little bit more horizontal in the sense, or a little more focused, I guess, around verticals with their platform. So they had an agriculture platform, or they had a healthcare platform. And then I think the next step that people started to become more focused, as you said, is focusing really on verticals and vertical solutions and tailoring their offerings to those verticals. And I think that's what's really helped us get to the point where we are now, across all different industries. The LoRa industry, I think, is seeing that too. It's just seeing the focus on utilizing these technologies where they're most applicable and most likely to see success in certain verticals like smart cities, campuses, things like that. You're starting to see all of that be honed in more from across the board in all the different companies that make up the ecosystem.
And in the end, it's kind of like the more verticals you have, the more you have to dilute your resources to become good at any of them. What you've seen is that some of these companies that went vertical, they found one, but then they went all in on that one. And I think that's where you saw some successes. Or you do it like Samsara, right? You raise $2 billion, and you just kind of like really brute force it. But also for such a company like Samsara, they are pretty focused on one type of customer. Maybe they're not focused on their portfolio, but actually, they're very much focused on a type of customer.
So one of the things you were talking about a second ago, it kind of spurred a thought I wanted to ask you. When companies are looking to bring on IoT solutions, what is the total cost of ownership of IoT, and how does that compare maybe to other technologies or other solutions they might bring in? How should people be thinking about that, and just kind of dive in there a little further?
So I think if we look at the last few years, I think companies that also failed in kind of IoT projects that failed, they probably did not do true costing of the total cost of ownership, kind of before they started their project. And what we do in our company, also for our product management and for kind of like to build our kind of product vision, is that we have this template of one typical solution with LoRaWAN. And I want everybody in our company to understand is that they're buying this piece of our service, and but there's kind of like 95% additional risk and cost that our customers are also investing in, right? So I want them to be very much aware of that. And our product vision is to kind of like, how do we help our customers drive down that total cost of ownership? And the total cost of ownership is very diverse, right? Kind of like this is installation, is building the network, installing the sensors, making the sensors. Maybe for a few percentage of the time, you need to replace the batteries. But there's a lot of kind of risk involved, right? Like if you want to roll out, for instance, a cold chain solution over like 1,000 franchisees of your quick service restaurant, you need to make sure that everything is well planned. So what we see on average for our base is that for every sensor, the total cost of ownership is around $300. And this is over 4 years. So and so now what you see a lot of interesting development is in the market. Is that there's always been this focus on kind of, you have this question, okay, this tracker, how much is this tracker? How much is the temperature sensor? Okay, that's like $40. That's like $80. But that really gives a very wrong perception of the case. And that also gives a very problematic focus, because actually the question should be, how expensive is it to install this tracker? How expensive is it to install this? How expensive is it to run it? Because then you have the complete picture. And we have always been advocates to kind of like not focus so much on, okay, what's that hardware costing, but actually look at what the whole thing is costing. And maybe we can add features to hardware and features to the service. Maybe make these costs a bit higher, but actually the overall picture becomes much more efficient and it becomes de-risked. And one really concrete example is that we now see in the LoRaWAN ecosystem that we have more and more solar kind of like, or energy harvesting devices that have like small solar panels on it. Then you can extend the lifetime for, like, say, 3 to 6 years, right? But this means, so the upside is not for the same money, the same total cost of ownership, because the majority goes in the device and the installation. You have not 3 years of data, but you have 6 years of data, right? And we all know that data becomes more valuable over time. So there's kind of this increase in value exponentially if you adapt these kind of technologies.
Yeah, I know with LoRa, the interesting thing is, once you get the infrastructure set up, the ability and cost to set up other use cases and deploy across, that property or that area dramatically changes in a positive way. Like you open yourself up to a lot more use cases once the infrastructure is in place. The cost to usually do that, the devices and stuff, are relatively inexpensive. So they're earlier on in their IoT adoption journey that they can think through what potential use cases that they might want after their first one is successful. I think the better they're going to be. And that just, I think, brings the overall ROI that they're going to see. It increases it a great deal. And I think that's something that's really powerful with LoRa and obviously other technologies as well, but something that I think IoT has always really hung its hat on.
No, yeah, definitely when you scale, right? So what you see, like, as a small systems integrator, maybe you can have some margin and have your mitigation because you can just manage it yourself with a small team of 5 people. But if you kind of like, we have customers that are going to install, or at the moment installing more than 1 million endpoint points for a project, for instance. So every penny counts there, right? For every minute you can save per installation is 1 million minutes, right? It's kind of like, it really matters.
Yeah, I think we're getting to a point where all the different companies that play a role in bringing a solution to market and implementing and deploying a solution, they're much more well versed in the different industries that they go into, and I think that enables those solutions to be more optimized, not just from a cost perspective, but also from an implementation perspective, the integration perspective, all the different areas that company's going to worry about and think about when it comes to what is this really going to cost me to deploy. I think it's we're in a better spot now for sure. One other question I want to ask you before we wrap up here: for the longest time that that I've been in the space, there has always been this level of hesitation that companies have had to bring on an IoT solution. Now, some will get over the fence and will, maybe dabble in it and get some devices and play around and try some things, maybe do a small pilot, and then, takes a little bit more to kind of get up to the point where everybody's hoping, which is to scale. So why have companies historically been skeptical of investing in and adopting IoT solutions on the enterprise side? And why has that kind of changed now? Because I definitely think we're in a much better spot than we have been in the past.
Great question, and it's kind of like every IoT company should ask themselves that every week. This question. In general, enterprise adoption of technology or of anything is slow, right? Like we as consumers, we buy an new iPhone every year, and enterprise is slower. For IoT, it's even more risky because actually the data says that still 20% of IoT initiatives succeed. So I think there's a few things that help, is that more and more kind of like standard integrated systems come available to the market because you have these companies that go more vertical. Second of all, what you see is that the systems which the IoT systems need to be integrated with, they're also becoming more mature. So IoT needs a digital endpoint, right? So I can bring in IoT, but in the end, if you do not have the capacity to do something with that data, maybe then like a standard IoT platform maybe give you a graph, but that doesn't like changed a lot in the business case. So we're kind of like, if a customer approaches us and they want to start a project, and I see they have a really good ERP, or kind of like maybe they even have like a good low-code, no-code platform, or they have adopted AWS or Azure or Google Cloud in a good way, right? Where I say, okay, this is a modern enterprise. I know that the IoT data is going to be fully leveraged. If I am approached by a company and I see kind of their digital transformation is at kind of like a very low level, you can bring in this kind of fancy thing, but then it's not going to land, right? It's going to end up like on a dashboard with a graph where in the end, nobody in the enterprise will log in, and after 3 weeks, everybody has forgotten the username and password, and then it's gone, right? So there's more things to play. So for sure, the de-risking and the decreasing total cost of ownership, but also very much the context that digital transformation is kind of like progressing in a lot of enterprises.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see. I mean, there's been a lot of hurdles that the companies that are in the IoT space and just the industry as a whole has had to overcome. As you know, and many others, we started IoT For All to help early on with that education problem of what the heck is IoT? Like, what are these technologies? Why are all these different kinds of components? How do they differ? How do they benefit my business? What can actually be done? And I think as education has improved and people start to understand that, their interest in adopting IoT has gone up. And then the next big piece that we saw was the successful deployments across different industries caught the attention of other players in those industries. So that was encouraging for people to say, okay, we're at a point now where the technologies are mature enough. We understand them a decent amount. The cost is more affordable and has more market validation. So, let's give it a try. And once you give it a try and you see what it can do and how you can expand into other use cases and just become more efficient in many different ways and provide potentially new revenue streams and so forth, it's just been a big win for a lot of organizations who have really gotten on that bandwagon, and we're excited for where it's going.
If you look at your community, so kind of like if you look 5 years back and now, kind of like, do you see that in the like communication or kind of like, I mean, I recognize that you just need fewer words to explain each other what it is, right? Like that, because, so how did this evolve for you guys? Because where are you guys going?
Yeah, so it's funny because initially a lot of the conversations were around more of the components and the technologies and just trying to understand at a fundamental level, what the heck does IoT even mean? And then once they dive into it, they start to see all these different technologies on the connectivity side, on, what is LoRaWAN? What is Wi-Fi? What is Bluetooth? Like, what do they really do? And then, talking about the hardware side, talking about different platforms and what they enable, what data can I collect? So a lot of it was at that very fundamental level. And then over the last few years, we've started to see those questions kind of dissipate a bit and more questions come around. Well, what can I do with IoT now? Like, I'm in the healthcare space. I don't care as much about the technology. I trust the technology is there. I trust it works. What can I do with it? And that's where the education has now kind of graduated to a point of showing what you can do with it, what solutions actually exist, and things along those lines. And that's where I think that's what's been most encouraging for us to see that progression. And because we're big believers that solutions are the solution to the market growth, because that's what people are adopting. And I think the more we can have companies that understand the problems in different verticals, focus their marketing and offerings to different verticals, the more easy it is for people in those verticals to understand and likely adopt solutions. And I think that's where I feel like we are now, and we're continuing to grow. And that's what's most exciting for us, just to kind of see that transformation over the last number of years.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, I think for us as well, it's like, I think there's a kind of constantly two jobs that we have is first of all, making sure we spark enough imagination on what you can do with it. And we do that with a very elaborate business case repository and kind of a listing of all kinds of different LoRaWAN business cases. And on the other side, it's just lowering the total cost of ownership and making that more scalable. And in the end, if you just solve these two problems, kind of like the market will grow. And you see it, right? Like we've grown in adoption around 100% year on year now. over the last few years, and it's kind of like it's really there, and there's kind of incrementally we've seen kind of larger deployments every year.
Those are two hurdles I think we had to get through, and we're in a much better spot now. It's continuing to improve, which is awesome. Last thing I wanted to ask you before you get out of here. Obviously, I know you all have your Things conference. Tell the audience a little bit about that. What's going on there? It's been a fantastic event over the years. What's the plan this year, and what should people like? How can people get involved?
Yeah. So what we just talked about, right? Like sparking imagination and making sure that you know what's possible. And this is what our user event, the Things Conference, is about. It's something we organize as the Things Industries, and we have 1,500 people from 70 different countries coming together in Amsterdam for 2 days. And basically what you'll see is the entire LoRaWAN ecosystem with all the vendors and all the players from all around the world. But also a lot of demonstrations and talks and panels around how to drive the business case and how to build a solution that drives a positive business case. One famous kind of item in that conference is what we call the wall of fame for LoRaWAN devices. Basically, a complete wall where basically every LoRaWAN device in the world is physically present. So if you come over, kind of like you go back with a kind of like a huge network, you've been able to kind of touch and see and some you can even test device, and you're educated about all the different business cases that are driven with this technology. So yeah, it's something that we are really excited about. It's always nice to see 1,500 of our users, and it's an open event, so everybody's welcome.
Well, really appreciate the time, as always. Excited to hear how the conference goes, and everything that's going on with you seems very exciting right now. So we'll definitely have to touch base later this year into next year, just to kind of talk about maybe where things are even going further than the conversation today, what we're most excited about, and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm sure we'll touch base again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.